Hello and welcome. You are here listening to Ease into Fall, Healthy Habits That Heal, and I'm excited to share this content with you. I am Jessica Graham Robinson of Sacred Space Healing Arts, and I am here and excited that you are here. And so the first thing I want to do is just take a moment to say, if you have other things going on, this is a good time to just minimize. So closing the door, turning off your phone, go, if you haven't already, go get something that's yummy to drink or warm to drink. Go get something to write with. Make sure that over this next little bit of time, you are ready to dive in and just be there for you and give all of your attention to this, because otherwise you're not going to get a whole lot out of it. I'll give you an example. There have been many times where I've signed up for free talks and workshops and webinars and things like that online myself. And when I have made the time to have nothing else going on and focus and take notes, I've gotten a lot out of some of the ones that I've done. But I've noticed a drastic difference in the ones like where, you sign up for something, you're trying to listen in while you multitask and do other things. And then by the end of it, you're like, didn't I know all of those things? Or I didn't really get much out of that. Like I feel, so I think, part of it could be the actual material, but a lot of times it's because when we're multitasking, that means we're not actually giving our attention to any one thing. It means we're like interacting or functioning on a very surface level instead of going deep. And I want you to be able to go deep. So if you haven't already, take the time to go ahead and put your phone on silent and move it away from you, and go get some colored pencils that you'd like to work with, and go get a beverage or some different things like that. All right. And then we will, going to give you a chance to do a couple of those things. And I hope you were able to hear the music that I was playing earlier. It's from East Forest, which is, I love their stuff, and they're on iTunes and lots of different places, but you can, the name of that song, I think the name of that album is Prana, and the name of that song was Apana, which I thought was very appropriate for what we're talking about today. Apana is a word in Sanskrit that means, like, it's the energy, it's the prana that is downward flowing. And so in this Vata time of year, we're experiencing a lot of not that. We're experiencing a lot of upward and outward flow, because that's what Vata is. Vata is a combination of wind and ether or space. And those, if you think about space and air, it's just like all over the place, right? It's moving fast, it's quick, it's light, it's dry and chaotic and kind of unpredictable. And so having apana is like, it's the opposite. That's the opposite of apana. Apana is what we want. So we want a downward grounding flow right now that will keep us connected to earth and not allow us to be quite so spacey. So I'm just gonna also go ahead and share with you a link. Let's see if I have it. There is a chat box. And so I'm going to share in the chat box a link. And if you go to that link, it's going to take you to a page. And if you're watching this as a recording afterwards, you will be sent the link. So you'll have that as well. And the link is going to have all the resources that go along with this online workshop. And also, just as a side note, if you are watching this afterwards, if you're watching the recording, same thing. Don't be multitasking, because that will just deflect. That will just make it so that you can't really absorb. You need some apana right now. We need to ground. All right. So if that's not now for you, then pause this and come back to it later when you do have that time. Okay. All right, so I'm going to grab a notebook, and if you haven't done that, you please grab your notebook and something to write with. All right, and I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit of how to access some of your goodies from this little mini course. All right, so the topic of easing into fall. Once I did a talk that was fall into ease. So this time I'm doing easing into fall, similar, but a little bit different. This one is focused on one of the habits of Ayurveda, which is a little more subtle than some of the other ones, right? So, and let's just first start with, again, another welcome. I want you to take a moment before I start diving into the material. And I want you to take a moment and make sure you have a good seat. So make sure you're literally physically grounded. Right? And take as much time as you need to do that. You can also pause if you're watching this later. But you could sit up on a pillow, you could sit in a chair. You might already be sitting in a chair at a table or a desk. And if that's the case, just make an effort to kind of pull out the flesh under your sitting bones so that your butt, your glutes are back behind you, not underneath you. And so then your spine is free to lengthen and undulate as it needs to. Right? Your head is free. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and place your palms downward, palms down on the thighs. So your hands, it doesn't matter if you're sitting in a chair. If you're sitting in a chair, feet flat on the floor, feet underneath your knees aligned with the hips, a little bit more wider. If you're sitting cross-legged is good. If you're sitting on the floor, or if you're sitting on a blanket or something like that. So either way, hands, palms down on the thighs. It's just a little more grounding. And I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to really bring some awareness into your seat, where you're sitting, your tush, some might say, and your breathing here. Notice that the breath is already present. You may have been holding a little. Just notice these things, no judging, just notice. I'm going to kind of drum us a little bit into just a grounded rhythm. It's very simple drumming, nothing fancy. But as you sit with eyes closed, I want you to bring more awareness to your breath. More awareness to your seat. See if you can breathe into your pelvis. Breathe into your lower back. The back of your heart. Your lower belly. Your pelvic floor. Your side ribs. Kidneys. Heart. Whole heart. Up the spine from the base all the way to the base of the skull. Relax your jaw. Be here now. Slowly begin to bring your body, your awareness back to this moment in time and into the space where you're in. You can slowly let your eyes drift open. And just notice how you feel, what the difference is now in how you feel versus earlier. So now I'm going to begin to share a little bit with you about who I am and what I'm here to share with you before I share that with you. So again, my name is Jessica Graham Robinson, and my website, my business is sacredspacehealingarts.com is the website. And my passion is sharing with people about just natural, everyday wisdom, really ancient wisdom, but also how it applies to our modern lives and how it's really in getting back to the natural cycles of things and lining up with nature, lining up with intuition and getting wild again in order to better our lives. Like, we are in a society where we keep reaching out and out and out. If you notice, we're reaching out for the next product, reaching out for a quick fix, reaching out for more technology. Not that technology is bad, but we're constantly reaching out for something different that's going to be the thing. And we're also reaching out for more, like we need these things. And the truth of it is, no, we don't. And the truth of it is, the answers, rather than being out there, are actually in here, inside of you. And this is how, in order for us to actually evolve, right, a personal evolution, personal growth, the answer, again, it's going forward and up into an expanding spiral of like getting better and better. But the answer, right, to doing that, to how to do that, is not coming from an external place. It's coming from an internal place. It's not coming from something like we don't know that we're reaching for. It needs to come instead from ourselves. Deep internal intuition, wisdom, and nature. This is the truth of it. We actually, in so many different areas, the world could really use going backwards in time a little bit and integrating some of the lessons that we've learned, and getting back tapped into nature and the natural cycles of the earth and our bodies in order to live healthier, happier lives. So I'm going to be teaching you a little bit about Ayurveda today. And Ayurveda literally is translated as science of life or knowledge of life. And it is like Chinese medicine is to China, Ayurveda is to India. It is literal science, but it's coming from a different culture. It's coming from 5,000 plus years ago. And where did this come from? Just like I said, it came from inside. It's inner wisdom. And it's tried and tested. Good Lord, if it's been tested for over 5,000 years and people are still using it with success, what does that say? It says, I think we need to be paying more attention to Ayurveda, which is also the sister science of yoga. Yoga also comes from India. And so you'll hear a lot, if you've done yoga, you'll hear a lot of similar words maybe, or just Sanskrit, that you hear in your yoga class, you're also going to hear here, because that's where Ayurveda comes from. It comes from India. And the old language of India, no longer spoken in general conversation, is Sanskrit. And so Ayurveda, I am here to share this with you because I am a yoga health coach, an Ayurvedic health coach, and I use the wisdom of Ayurveda and that specifically the habits of self-care that I work with people very specifically with 10 habits of dinacharya, which is the self-care habits. And they're basically things that, there's lots of things you hear about, like you should do this, it's good for you, you should not do that. But in Ayurveda, like these 10 habits that I teach people, these are non-negotiable habits. They're things that, for the most part, like 75 to 99% of the time, you want to have these habits dialed in order to live a healthy and happy and thriving life inside and out. Otherwise, you don't, right? We don't really live a thriving life if we don't live these habits. And so I'm a certified yoga health coach, and that's what qualifies me in a lot of ways to bring this material to you. But also I've lived them, and I've lived life without them. I've lived life with them. And I know that there's a very big difference. Just to give you a little bit of a background, I've been in the wellness field with studying yoga and teaching yoga for over 20 years. And a lot of tools, I've gathered a lot of tools, and I had a lot of these tools for many years, but it took me really implementing some of these habits of Ayurveda to be able to up-level my life in a really new way. I'll just say that before, even though I knew about yoga, even though I knew how to eat healthy food, I didn't have the integrity that I wanted in my body and following through how I was showing up in my life. And I was living in a very stressful way. I was stressed and overwhelmed all the time. And it was taking a toll on my spirit in a big way. And I was feeling kind of depressed and like I wasn't living my dharma. I wasn't living my purpose. And so anyway, so these habits not only bring us so much thrive and awake and radiant living from our bodies, from that physical perspective, but also internally, they really in a big way kind of need to be in place in order for us to be able to step up into that place where we are living our dharma. So dharma is your work in the world. It's what are you meant to do? What's your path? What are you here for? Kind of your work in the world. And so in a big way, these habits help us to be able to live into that. Otherwise, we're kind of caught up in what happens to be happening today in our lives, what the latest obstacle or trauma or issue is, if you will, instead of being able to get past that easily and live into what's really important. Because we all know that these mundane pieces of like figuring out what's for dinner and cooking the dinner and doing the laundry and, figuring out like bills to pay, all of this, that's not the important stuff. The important stuff is what's meaningful to you. And so that's another thing that is really good. And you can write this down if you just write down the word values in your notebook, and I want you to start to contemplate, and maybe things will come to you throughout this workshop of what do you value? What has meaning for you, like deep meaning? And you probably already know, but sometimes we forget, or sometimes we know, but we're out of integrity with our values, or sometimes we just haven't taken the time to clarify our values, and we're actually living on a set of values that was handed down to us, right, through your family line or through your work even, that like for instance, you might be living in a way where you're working so much that you, because of your work ethic, because of, you wanting to show up for those people at work, you're working so much that your life, the people you love, the finding time for your own personal growth and nourishment is put on the back burner. And if that's the case, that's the value you're living out, but is that the value that you mean to be living? Is that really true for you? Most people, I think, would say no. They would say family does matter, So these are the kinds of ways we want to start thinking about, what do you value? What has meaning for you? Deep meaning. And how is your life reflecting that? That's one thing we can consider. So the reason we're talking about easing into fall is because fall is a time where, in a way, it's a big shift for a lot of people. Not only does the season change, so we have all of the qualities of vata, of fall, that I explained earlier. So air and space, like just, right? So you've got all of that happening. But if you think about when you have extra air and space, and there's more of a tendency to become ungrounded. Think about wind and how the wind might blow dust around or blow leaves around, and it's super dry and just moving around. And in that kind of an environment, it works for some things. Obviously, wind is not a bad thing, but it doesn't work for us staying grounded. It doesn't work for being at ease if we're only in that environment. So there are 5 elements in Ayurveda, just like in Chinese medicine, but they're different elements. And these elements are space or ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And then we have these 3 doshas that are, each dosha is a combination of 2 of those elements. And so vata, as I've said before, is space and air. And when we are in that period of time, it becomes extra crucial for us to do things that are pacifying for vata, because otherwise there is a tendency for all of those qualities, which can all be great qualities, but there's a tendency for those qualities to kind of quickly move out of balance. And then we get things like overwhelm, and we get things like anxiety and worry and constipation. And have you ever noticed, like, so we were moving, for some people, if you've got kids, it's back to school time, right? It's that school's already started, but it's still like you're getting back into that routine coming out of summer where there's not so much routine. So we're coming out of summer, which is a pitta time, pitta is fire and water. And so it's very volatile. And there's lots of sun, lots of heat in the summer. And we're coming out of that very full, lots of sun energy time. And we're moving toward winter now, but we're in between. So fall itself is a transitional time between summer and winter. And as we move into that, we want to slow down. So that's the very first thing that we want to kind of pay attention to, is how can we slow things down rather than the quickening that's happening in Vata season. So again, now we look back at the values. How do we simplify? By looking at our values, by prioritizing based on our values, what matters most to you. So on your paper now, if you could write down, if you could start to think about those values and write down, what are your core values? And you could have several, but let's try to keep it to 5 maximum, maybe even 3. You might even have one that comes up that's just the biggest for you. And then after values, you can even think about other things in your life, like people, right? Specific people or specific things in your life that you value, not a value concept per se, but like an actual tangible piece of your life, like a person or a place or an event or an ongoing event, right? Like things that can be really meaningful, like having your morning time to yourself, or having quality time with people that you love. And so you start to think, what would you, another question, another way you can kind of clarify, get into that answer is, what would you do if you had a blank slate? If you had everything you could possibly want, right? So there's no obstacles, and you had infinite time, what would you do with that time? What would be the first thing on your list? So I want you to make a list now and tell me, tell yourself, what are those things? Like, start with start just making a list without filtering. But then as you start to get a few things written down, you can ask yourself, even these being my top priorities, like which one's number one? Which one's number two? And so on. So I'll give you a minute to do that, to this whole piece so far. Values, things of great meaning in your life, and then prioritizing. Well, I skipped one. So it's actually 4 things. It's what are your values, up to 5 things. And then you can also list what are things in your life that are very meaningful to you, like that have value and meaning. Some of the most important things. And then asking yourself, if you had a blank slate and all of the necessary supplies, money, time, space, none of these things are an issue, right? Blank slate, you have everything you need. What would you do with your time? What would you do with your time? And then the 4th part is prioritize those. And you can make this fun if you have colored markers, colored pencils, colored pens. It can be really fun to create these things and play around with them. So now I'm going to, let's see, where did I put that? I didn't put it anywhere yet. All right. Right, so now I'm going to share, this is your worksheet that is on, it's one of the resources that you have in the website that I'm sharing with you guys. So I'm going to share this page with you. We can talk about this a little bit. Make that bigger. All right, so this is your worksheet. I'm going to make it a little bigger as we go through one thing at a time. So the first thing is this beautiful quote from Pema Chodron. And if you don't know of Pema Chodron, she is an amazing monk, and she has at least a couple of books that are so worth your time, and audiobooks as well. And she's very, very much about one of the books that I have is, I think it's called What to Do When Things Fall Apart or something like that. And it's basically the same idea. We've all heard this before, that the only thing constant in life is change, but somehow we still keep clinging for things to stay like in control and just right where we put them, right? Even though we know that that's not the way things work. And so in this book, one of the things she talks about is opening ourselves up to the unknown in that way, and to not having to have control not needing things to be a certain way. So here's one quote from her that I thought was really appropriate for today. And it's, welcome the present moment as if you had invited it. It is all we ever have, so we might as well work with it rather than struggling against it. We might as well make it our friend and teacher rather than our enemy. And this goes along with the concept of easeful living. And easeful living, again, is one of the habits that I teach people about. And it's really about how you perceive the world around you, how you perceive your life, how you perceive everything. In our perceiving, we have a choice. There is a choice that you make, whether you make it consciously or not, right? So from now throughout your life, you may have completely, for the most part, unconsciously just been going along, right? So just to put this in perspective, I was in a victim mentality for like most of my life, probably so far, until I realized that I was in a victim mentality. And so once I realized that, so victim, if you're not familiar with this, it's feeling like everything is being done to you, right? Life is happening to you instead of you making choices that have consequences and you being in control and going with the flow. So when something happens, like, what was your part in it, rather than look what so-and-so did. Does that make sense? And so therefore feeling like you've been a victim of life, like, oh, poor me, right? So we have a choice in each moment. And there's another Pema quote, and I don't have it with me, but it's one of my favorites. And it's that the sentiment of it is that in each moment you have a choice of how to respond to life, whether to basically respond with some kind of resistance, contraction, right? A sharpness. And that might be lashing out. That might be blaming. That might be being angry. That might be getting depressed and going into your cave, like, and retreating. So like responding with contraction or with openness. So something happens you don't expect. You have a choice, like, to respond to it with contraction, which is ultimately stress and causes you not only stress, but dis-ease, or responding with openness, with, this is what is, why struggle, right? And it's easy to see this in like smaller examples. Like if you look at younger children and watch them arguing over something that as an adult you can easily see is not worth all of the tears and not worth the anger, not worth all of those bad feelings, contraction. And instead, like you can easily look at it and see, like, man, if they could just make another choice, it would be so easy to just step back and go, oh, okay, well, I'll play with this then, or right? But we do the same thing as adults. We just change the object, right? Or the subject changes a little bit, but it's the same thing. We get so wrapped up in what's happening that it's easy to, all of a sudden, you're struggling, you're contracted, you're fighting, you're stressed. And it doesn't mean literally fighting. It could even just mean fighting life, right? Like you're always swimming against the stream. So I'll just ask you a simple question, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to it, but I might not. Would you rather be experiencing openness, flow, ease or struggle, stress, and going against the flow. So I'm pretty sure like no one in their, at least no one in their right mind would would choose the path of struggle and contraction, right? It's no fun. Stress is no fun. But the good news is that you have more control over it than you might have realized. So you have the option to start to recognize when any situation comes to you. You have the ability to perceive it differently, perceive it as what is, and take a breath and just embrace it. You don't have to like it, but you can embrace the moment and the fact that this is happening. And then you can make a choice that's based on going with the flow and maybe into a different direction, but still making that choice of openness, because you can't even think properly. You can't even come up with you can't make the right choices that you would want to make if you're in a state of stress, because your mind's not clear. You're very much like influenced by that thing. All right. So in talking about this, we have this worksheet, this easeful living worksheet, and you're just answering these questions for yourself. Like, what things in your life bring you a feeling of ease right now? What are some of the things in your life that bring you a feeling of ease just naturally? Because, I mean, one reason is because you probably want to start incorporating more of those things, but just recognizing. And it might be that you want to print this out and bring it with you, like kind of just keep it along with you and make some notes, because maybe you'll think of some things as the day goes on. What things in your life bring you a feeling of stress? And so we know, after having this conversation, after what I've just said about stress versus ease being your choice, we know that nothing inherently is stressful then, or is easeful even. They can be, but it's all in your perception. So what things, like just making a note of those things that bring you a feeling of stress, because those are the things that you're going to want to probably start to steer clear of, or open yourself differently to, right? But being aware of what the triggers are for you right now. So this actually, like, you might have a lot to say here about the things, and you can use the back of this page. So then after you've done that, things I can do to align with ease. So I want you to do some thinking about that. What things can you do to align with ease? And these are not the kinds of things that are in the first question. What things in your life bring you a feeling of ease? These are things that you can actively do to make the choice to align with ease rather than stress. And then things I do to align with stress. So this question is about what things are you doing already that are aligning with stress rather than ease. So they, again, similar to a couple questions up, you want to start to recognize in your life, in your daily life, what are you doing that is bringing you more stress? Where are you making that choice? You know, like what things are triggering you, and you like all of a sudden line up with stress rather than ease. Right? These are powerful questions, and they seem very simple, but this is where bringing awareness makes all the difference. Actually getting clear on what is bringing you ease, what is bringing you stress, where can you align? How can you do that? How can you align with ease versus stress? And where have you seen yourself aligning with stress in your life? And then, so obviously, same as the question before, you know, do you want openness or contraction, right? So you obviously don't want to be a stressed out person, right? I don't think you do. And so if that's the case, then we need to start brainstorming about some new ideas about who we are. Who am I? Who are you? Right? So personally, who am I? So this is a really powerful exercise at the bottom. It's an identity evolving exercise. And you literally are sitting now with this question. So I want you to take a couple deep breaths. Not a question, but it's a sentence stem. It's a prompt. I am becoming the kind of person who, and you fill in the blank, and it doesn't have to have one answer. You can fill out the second part of the sentence many times. I am becoming the kind of person that I am becoming the kind of person that appreciates. So these are just 3 different sentence stems, and I'm going to give a little space here for you guys to do this exercise. And then you have this worksheet to complete, also to continue to add on to. So now I'm going to backtrack a little. So if you can just find a stopping place for that. And finish up that last little bit. And then we're going to go back to our idea here of like just going back to the beginning, kind of following through with, so we've got a clear pathway of what we're doing here. So we're looking at values and what's important and prioritizing those things. We're looking at using our values as a way to simplify our lives so that we can be more intentional, so that we can learn what to say yes to and what to say no to. Because it's even now, like you could say in general, fall and winter are probably slower seasons, like than spring and summer. But things still, like there's still lots of potential. There's always lots of potential for things getting really busy. For people with families, it's school activities and outside like sports and things like that. Different kinds of lessons you may take your kids to. And for people that don't have families, it could be just doing more things with friends, doing social things coming up, or at work, like things coming to a head. Like there's always reasons, whether it's the end of the year is coming and you have to wrap up projects, or the new year is coming and you want to get yourself to a certain place, or taxes, or there's always reasons for us, or holidays, right? To like get busy, to get overwhelmed, to do too much, or to rush around. And all those things create excess vata. And all of those things are very, can be very stressful when we do too much. And so the question is right now, in order to more easily move into this time of year, how can you start to simplify? So can you get good at saying no to the things that aren't on your list of values, the things that don't support those values, or even just so good at saying yes to those things that you do value that it's an automatic no for a lot of other things. If you're weighting these things out, if you really look at your values, then it becomes easier to say no to the things that aren't in the best interest of those values. And so once we've done that, right, so we simplify, look at the values, simplify, right, get simpler. And then in this time, we want to start to just have a more easeful orientation. And that's what the worksheet is for. And one of the ways that we can support ourselves in having a more easeful orientation is to sleep, is to get to bed early, is to start that routine. See if you can adopt that habit of getting to bed early. And so I've included, I'm not gonna go through it right now, but in your resources, you have a web page that has a video on evening bedtime ritual, how to get, deeper rest. And so in that video, I talk a little bit about different rituals you can incorporate, meditating, looking at your day, looking at tomorrow, foot massage, these different things that you can do for yourself to really nourish yourself in a way that sets you up for that deep rest that night and for the next day. And so this is really what I'm giving you here is a recipe for shifting into living a lifestyle that is more that is more supportive of your values and is moving you in the direction of your personal evolution, not just continuing, right, until something breaks or until we get a disease or until we find ourselves just so overwhelmed or racked with anxiety that we're obviously living from a painful place. We don't want to get there. So another thing that's so special about this time of year has a lot of meaning for me and just in general. I don't know about you, but fall, there's something really special about it. Maybe it's all of the seasons and having that you just get to spend this time every year for this little period of time that is really, that's what makes it special because it changes. It's not going to be there forever. And it's something you get to look forward to. So fall can be a really special marker in your year for like coming back to this time of slowing down, this time of getting back to who are you, how are you showing up, who do you want to be, what habits can you adopt that bring you into greater ease and bring you directly into the flow of your evolution, of moving in the direction of your personal growth and who and how you want to be. So another of the resources that I'm offering for you guys on the webpage is a tip sheet, and it's double-sided. So since it's on a web page, you're going to have to print both sides, but there's some recipes and tips on things that will bring you more ease, because as I keep mentioning, the habits that support ease, the habits that support your evolution, it's really when we line up with nature in this way, like our natural rhythms. When I say nature is huge, nature is big, nature is not just the trees and the grass outside or the wild animals. You are nature. I am nature. We are nature. And so when we neglect that part of ourselves and think of ourselves as separate, we're really cutting off a big part of ourselves. And then we start to think of, like, when we start to compartmentalize like that, that's not how things are, and that's not how they flow, and it's not going to support us at all. So like I said earlier on, the answer to going forward is actually moving back into ourselves. And you've heard this term possibly before, the idea of rewilding ourselves. And so rewilding ourselves to our nature, like getting back to, who are you? Who do you want to be? How can you thrive? What was your purpose here? How can you live that more fully? How can you experience more delight and more meaning in your life? And so having the habits that hold you, that ground you to nature, to the natural cycles in nature, those things allow you the ability to be able to look in the direction of other things, to be more creative, to strive for your dharma, all of these things. Like when you're so caught up in day-to-day and overwhelm and just mundane things that are seemingly chaotic, right? So if you're every day like, oh gosh, what am I going to have for dinner? Oh gosh, what do I do because this happened? Then you're kind of like, you're reacting, you're playing life from a reactionary place of like, oh, what do I do about that? Right? And you're constantly having to make these choices about everything and to dodge these bullets and to put out these fires. And that's exhausting. And it takes all of your energy, all of your daily energy and effort and attention to just deal and react. Whereas if you can be more proactive and intentional and adopt the habits that support like you thriving, then you don't have to be putting out fires anymore, because those things flow because they're taken care of. And then you can start to create the life that you want on top of those habits that support you thriving inside and out. So I hope that this was helpful for you, and I would love to hear from you. I would love to offer you for being here and seeing this and participating. I'd love to hear back from you and see what you got out of it. But I'd also love it if you would schedule a wellness discovery session with me, a time where we can sit down, get on the phone together, and I just deeply listen to you and where you are and where you want to be. And we talk a little bit about how you might be able to benefit from some of the work that I do. Again, there's no strings attached. It's absolutely free. It's just a time to be heard and seen, and to see what might need to happen next in the area of your personal evolution and growth. So I'm going to, or there is a link posted at the bottom of the page that is for you to schedule with me. And I highly recommend that you do that. And I would love to connect with you. And I hope you have a wonderful transition into fall. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Namaste.